So isn't it interesting that in the middle of all the chaos going on around us, we're all looking for answers. When things get chaotic or when we find ourselves in the middle of a storm or turbulent times, we start looking for a safe place to turn and maybe even to hide. And we start looking for an anchor. Maybe we even start looking for a North Star to actually guide us and give us direction. And in the midst of all the chaos, you maybe even have been tempted to turn to Jesus, but for some, maybe because of misinformation you've received about Jesus, or maybe because you bought into some lies about Jesus, you've actually made the choice to reject Jesus, or maybe you've actually walked away from Jesus, or maybe it's somebody that you know that's turned away from Jesus, or they've turned away from church, or just turned away from Christianity, or maybe it's you, and you remain distant from Jesus, or you're scared to actually turn to Him, and it's all because at some point in your life, you bought into some misrepresentation of Jesus. And so each week during the month of May, we're actually taking a look at a different lie, a Jesus lie, we're calling it. We're taking a look at misinformation that maybe you've heard about Jesus. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to discover the truth about Jesus so that we can actually turn to Him with great confidence in the midst of this storm. And so the lie we want to address today is this. It's one that I find very troubling, and it's this idea that somehow you have to have your life all together before you can even turn or come to Jesus. I mean, the lie is this. It's that you've got to get your life together before you come to Jesus. And the reason I find this lie so troubling is because it's hard to get our act together, especially today in these unsettling times. And some of us are facing major issues. I mean, it may be health issues related to COVID-19 and some maybe not. Or some of us are facing financial pressures and some caused by shutdowns or the loss of a job, or some of us have jobs that are involved in the medical profession and the stress can be overwhelming. And so life is hard. It's not easy to live today, and it's not easy to have our lives together. And then you add to that just the little problems that we face every day. For instance, two little things that I'm facing right now, neither big deals at all, but they're just nuisances really. And one is the fact that after wearing sweatpants all week long, now every weekend I have to worry about whether I can still fit into my jeans or not. And that's actually a problem. And Ruth and I were laughing and saying, isn't it funny how these days when we talk about let's get dressed up, we're actually just talking about, let's put on a pair of jeans, and as though somehow wearing jeans is dressing up now. And then the other little matter is just the whole thing about haircuts. And it's been a while since I've had a haircut, and I keep holding off thinking that somehow Governor Wolf is about to reopen up all the barbershops and the salons. And see, the alternative is whether or not I have Ruth cut my hair or not, or do I just kind of let it keep growing? And so far, just letting it keep growing is winning, which is really crazy, I know, because Ruth is great at pretty much everything she does, and I trust her with my life. I'm just not quite ready to trust her with my hair right now. And add to that the fact that even though I'm an introvert, I miss you guys. I miss being around you and seeing you and talking to you and hugging you and shaking hands, and I really do miss you guys. And then there's this other kind of nuisance of Zoom calls. And are you having as many Zoom calls as I am these days? I mean, Zoom calls are great. And I don't know what we would be doing without them, but the problem with Zoom calls is you've got to clean yourself up first. You've got to prepare for these Zoom calls. And somebody actually sent me this picture this week, and this is the picture on the left. That's kind of what we look like when we're on a Zoom call, but there's not going to be any video. It's just audio. And then the picture on the right is what we look like on a Zoom call when we know there's going to be video. And so we definitely clean ourselves up, and you'd never know it's the same dog, would you? Now, I'm afraid a lot of us have bought into the lie that we've got to get our act together before we actually come to Jesus. And maybe somewhere along the way, you've been convinced that Jesus is not okay with you until you've got your life together, that what He really wants from you is to have your life all figured out before you come to Him. And we think we have to have that alcohol addiction corrected before turning to Jesus. We think we have to have that fractured relationship restored before coming to Jesus. Or we think we have to have answers to all of our questions. Questions like, why is there pain? Why is there suffering in the world before we can actually come to Jesus? Or we think we have to be able to withstand sexual temptations before Jesus is actually going to love us and accept us. And we think we have to know everything there is to know about Jesus before we can start a relationship with Him. And then for some of you, You've already come to Jesus, but you think somehow Jesus won't put up with you and he won't keep putting up with you unless you keep your act together. But the fact is, nobody has all of the answers, and nobody has their acts all together, and I don't have it all together, and you don't have it all together. And the Bible actually says nobody's perfect, nobody. Everybody on the planet is broken, and yet we walk around trying to impress people and pretend that somehow we've got it all together, but we don't. None of us do. And here's the problem. Trying to get your act together before coming to Jesus, or trying to keep your act together, just results in feelings of frustration or disappointment or anger or bitterness or just feeling lost, maybe even thinking that somehow Jesus is always mad at you. So let me tell you the truth. The truth is that Jesus is actually okay with us being in process. Jesus is actually okay with us not having our act all together. The truth is Jesus is okay with our questions. He's okay with our doubts. Jesus is okay with our uncertainties. Jesus is okay with our I don't know. And he's okay with our being in process. And he meets us wherever we are in the process, wherever we are in our journeys. Now, yes, David, how do you know this? And well, how do I know that Jesus is okay with me when I don't have my act all together? And so I actually want to read you a story from the Bible that tells me that Jesus is okay with me actually being in process. It's a story that tells us that Jesus meets us right where we are, and he greets us with open arms again and again. And we'll put the story up on the screens for you, and I would invite you to actually read along on the screen and read the story with me if you can. It's John chapter 9, verse 11 is where this story is found. And the story actually says this: as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Now, if you were with us a few weeks ago, we looked at this portion of this particular story, but let me read the rest of the story to you. It says, verse 6, then Jesus spat on the ground, made mud with saliva, spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and others who knew him as the blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, it just looks like him. But the beggar kept saying, yes, I am the same one. In other words, this guy can see for the very first time in his life, and nobody would even believe it. Nobody's even excited for him. And so then they ask, who healed you? What happened to you? And he told them, the man they called Jesus made mud, spread it over my eyes, and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and I washed, and now I can see. So I want to point out a couple of interesting things that jump out to me, at least in this story. And I mean, what's very evident to me is that this man, he didn't have his act all together before Jesus came along and healed him. And as a matter of fact, he didn't even go and try to find Jesus. Instead, Jesus actually comes and finds him. And not only did he not go and try to find Jesus, this blind man, he never even asked Jesus to heal him. And I mean, surely he had heard about Jesus. Surely he had heard the miracles that Jesus had already performed. And I mean, everybody was talking about Jesus. Besides, Jesus had already healed 3 other blind men before encountering this man. But this man, as Jesus approaches, he sits in silence. Maybe he was expecting Jesus to pass right by him. Perhaps he'd already resolved in his mind that Jesus would never waste his time with somebody like me, somebody that others would deem broken or useless. Can I just say, could it be that you think Jesus would never waste his time with you? You too are broken, and at times you wonder if you aren't useless. And can I just say, Jesus didn't pass by this man. Jesus stopped, and he poured out compassion, and he poured out grace on this blind man. And Jesus has the exact same response for you. He doesn't wait for you to get your act together. Jesus doesn't wait for you to figure it all out. Rather, he did the same thing he did for this blind man, Jesus does for you. He pours out his compassion and his grace on you right where you are, just as you are right now. And people that had known this blind man for his entire life, they wanted an explanation. They wanted answers. They said, how did this happen? How did you change? They asked him. And again, it's not like they were happy for him. They just wanted explanations. And it's fascinating when Jesus changes your life. You would think people would be excited for you, but they may not be, and they may just want explanations. How did this happen? The thing is, this blind man, he really didn't have an explanation. He didn't really have an answer. He just said, it was Jesus. Actually, he didn't even say it was Jesus. He said, the man they call Jesus did this, which implies the guy didn't really know Jesus at all. And how did this happen? I don't know. I really don't know. I just know that the man they call Jesus did this for me. And yet for Jesus, that was enough. Jesus didn't expect this guy to have all of the answers. Jesus didn't expect this guy to have his act together. Nowhere close. All this man needed to know was that it was Jesus that had changed his life. You don't have to have all the answers. And when you don't have all the answers, don't be afraid to just say, I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that it was Jesus. It was Jesus that changed my life. And you see, life is a process. It's a journey. And we've got to keep moving forward. And there'll be times on our journeys where we're taking 3 steps forward and feeling good, and all of a sudden we find ourselves taking 2 steps back. And it'll happen again and again. And Jesus says, you know what? I'm actually okay with that. Just keep moving forward and following me. So I want to introduce you to another man. This man's name is Ken, and Ken has been a part of LCBC's Mannheim campus for a number of years. Ken actually knows what it's like not to have your act together. Ken actually knows what it's like to take 3 steps forward and then take 2 steps back, or actually, Ken knows what it's like to take 3 steps forward and then take 10 steps back. And I mean, there were times in Ken's life when it seemed like he had it all together. And then there were times in Ken's life where he was completely lost, hopelessly lost, he would say. But the great thing is that Jesus was okay with Ken not having his act all together. And Jesus kept welcoming Ken back every time Ken walked away from Jesus. And so I want you to listen to Ken's story.
My life was almost over before it began. My mother decided about 63 years ago that she was going to have an abortion. It just wasn't in her plan to have a child. Ended up going to the doctor, and the doctor was arrested, and I was born. Throughout my teenage years, I studied Buddhism and Hinduism and Maoism and Taoism and Sikhism and Jainism and all kinds of other isms and schisms, including the Bible, just trying to find out what the answer was, if there was any answer after this life. I decided I wanted to head out to the epicenter of religious thought back in the 70s, which was California. And I wanted to be an actor, like everybody in California. I ended up meeting this girl, and she said, if you want to be an actor, what you might want to think about doing is being a model. She liked my look, I had the long hair and the beard and stuff, which was a different look than anybody else. So they did some shots with me, and she said, yeah, you got what we want, but you got to go to New York. And I thought, well, this was great. There's a major company, a modeling agency, acting agency, and so I thought, okay, I'll do this. My friends were having a party at Balboa Park, and it was a beautiful night. I remember fireworks going off, climbing up on the roof of my van, and I'm just kind of looking up and thinking, wow, I've got everything. And now here I am going into New York. I'm going to become famous and all this. I was all excited about this. And I remember just looking up, and I remember just holding my hands up, and I started to feel this tingling come up into my chest. And the next thing, boom, I fell down on the roof of my van. I'm thinking to myself, no, wait a minute, Ken, what's going on? Not Ken, you might be dying. No, you can't be dying. You got all this in front of you. You can't be dying. But then I started to think, you might be dying. You better figure this out quick. So I started thinking all the different, Eastern thought, Buddhism, kind of settled in on Hinduism because that kind of made the most sense to me. Something, and then I thought that might be the answer. Maybe that's it. But I remember having this incredible feeling of being lost, where if I did leave this world at that moment, I wasn't going where I wanted to go. And I remember just laying there, and I had this fear that overtook me about dying. And I remember just saying in myself, God, I don't know who you are, what you are, but please show me. And that verse that I had read in the Bible came into my mind at that moment. I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life, and no one comes unto the Father except through me. And I remember hearing that, and I thought, okay, give me another chance. Let me see what that means. That night, I left the party, went back to where I was living, and I opened the Bible, and I found what Jesus meant when he said, I am the only way. And I realized all these other religions and cults, the reason why they were so popular is because they appealed to your pride, they gave you a way to earn your way into heaven and to come to know Christ, to come to know God through his Son. There's no way to get to him except through what Jesus did when he died on the cross. And that night I gave my life to Christ. After being very successful in New York, but seeing what that world was about, I wanted to go someplace else. God opened the doors. Someone had a sailboat for sale in the Caribbean, never sailed before, but I thought, hey, this is the answer. Lived off the water for a while, sailing, spearfishing, and then ended up getting a job on a 3-masted topsail schooner. We're several hundred miles off the coast, and we hit the perfect storm. We were in a raging storm. Lightning cracking, rain coming down. We had seas 20, 25 feet. So the captain told me to go up on the mizzen mast, which is the mast in the back, and he went up on the main and he sent the other crew member up on the foremast in the front. So we're up there wrapping up the topsail. So as we're doing this, I remember the lightning cracked and we're looking out on the horizon, and all of a sudden this monster wave comes. They call it a rogue wave, and just, a lot higher than all the other waves. I'll never forget the sight. And I remember looking at the captain like, what do we do? And all I remember seeing him do is he grabbed the mast. And so we all grabbed the mast. For a split second, the lightning cracked. I looked down below and there was no boat, and there were these 3 little sticks sticking up in the ocean. And I realized at that moment that this could be it. We could be done. But it was so different than that time in California because I wasn't afraid to die. I knew if I died, I knew where I would be. There was no fear, and that was amazing. The next thing I know, all of a sudden the schooner, woof, comes up out of the water. Water's coming out, bilges are pumping like crazy, but the point of it was we made it. So I left working on the schooner and my life at sea, ended up moving into the brokerage business. Went to work for a major Wall Street firm in Lancaster. Things were going along pretty good, but what happened is that I started falling away from my faith. I got into pornography, seriously addicted to pornography. And again, on the surface, I look great. Nothing, that's a hidden sin for a lot of men. But I got deeply involved in pornography, and my life was deteriorating. And it almost destroyed me. But then the Lord brought me back. And all of a sudden, he opened up more doors for me. My business was prospering. That went on for quite a number of years, until up about 17, 18 years ago. I just started nibbling away again at sin in my life. And now I saw myself again falling back into that place. And what happened to me is I fell into a much, much darker place than what I had even been before. Met a couple of girls. The one was a paralegal, the other was a school teacher, but they also had another career at night. They were escorts. And found out they had another big problem, and that was cocaine and crack. I ended up becoming addicted. And then at the same time, I was also giving them rides to their appointments. They introduced me to some other girls, and I was kind of their confidant, their protector, their pimp. I was dropping a couple girls off at a hotel over in York. All of a sudden, the front doors bust open, and in come all these state cops. They grab me, throw me down on the pool table, and cuff me up and haul me off. I remember just then, at that point, just looking up to God, even though I felt so far away from him, and just saying, I don't want to come home to you like this. And I'm going to. I don't want to come home to you like this, so do whatever you need to do to bring me back to you. I was charged with 5 felony 2s. I was facing 4 to 7 years upstate. And, but the good part about it was that I knew this was the Lord answering my prayer. What that began in me was this revitalization where God started bringing me back and cleaning me up and continuing to work in my life again and bringing me to a place where I know what's back there and I don't ever want to live behind the curtain anymore. And then I visited LCBC, and I'm very thankful to LCBC that they opened their doors and that I was loved in spite of all the horrendous things that I had done in my past. And one of the great things about it was through that, 4 or 5 years ago, the doors opened up for me to go into York County Prison and begin a prison ministry there on Monday nights, which it's like the highlight of my week. And God's blessed me in such a way that I can talk to a CEO of a Fortune 500 company because of my background about Christ and about my story. Or I can talk to a guy in the corner with a needle stuck in his arm. I look back on my life now and I can't really explain to myself why I would have allowed myself to go back again. I guess I was only giving him part of myself. I didn't want to. I wanted to hold on to something. And this is why God, He is the God of second chances and third chances and fourth chances. I mean, you know, the only way to really be found is to know that you're really lost. My name's Ken, and I'm a life changed by Christ.
So I listen to Ken's story and I go, man, that's a lot of steps forward, but a lot of steps back. But there's a lot of things that I actually like about Ken's story. I mean, I love it when Ken says, God brought me back again and again, because fortunately for Ken and fortunately for me and fortunately for you, God is all about second chances and third chances and fourth chances and more. And I also love how God uses our missteps and the steps that we take backwards to impact others. I mean, did you notice how God is using Ken's time in prison to actually open the doors now for Ken to reach out to others who are in prison today? And I actually believe that Ken was 100% correct when he said the only way to really be found is to know that you are lost. See, here's the thing. Just because you're lost right now doesn't mean you have to stay lost. And in order to be found, it's really just a matter of acknowledging the fact that I'm lost. Just name it. Just admit it. Just say, I'm lost right now. And then turn around. And as you turn around, begin to follow Jesus. You admit you're lost. You turn around and then you follow Jesus. And what I've learned over the years is that the more I keep my eyes on Jesus and follow Him, the less I tend to get lost. The more I keep my focus on Jesus, the less I fall backwards. If I would only keep my eyes on Jesus, I would never get lost. But in your journey and on your journey, you will fall back, and you will fall back. And when you do, here's what you need to know. Jesus is still okay with you because Jesus is for you. He's not against you. And all too often we have this image of God and Jesus just being angry, angry God, angry Jesus. Jesus is angry at me, but Jesus is for you. He's not against you. And He promises to lead us and to guide us if we'll only follow Him and focus on Him and to go before us and show us where to take our next steps. And Psalm 119 verse 105 says, your word is a lamp to guide my feet and a light for my path. And just think about it, a lamp doesn't show us the entire journey. The lamp doesn't eliminate the entire trip. It just shows us where to take our next step. And Jesus promises to come behind us. Isaiah 52:12 says, for the Lord will go ahead of you. Yes, and the God of Israel will protect you from behind. In other words, when we take missteps, when we take steps backwards, this is even true. When we do something stupid, even when we take a step backwards, God is for you. He's not against you. Jesus is for you. He's not against you. And Romans 8:31 says, if God is for us, who can ever be against us? And what this means is that God is for you throughout your entire day and your entire life. He's for you when you feel trapped because you're working from home while at the same time you're serving as your kid's algebra teacher and their science teacher. And He's for you when you're at odds with your husband over whose turn is it to cook dinner. And He's for you when you're lying in bed and you're scared to death that it might be the coronavirus. And He's for you when you're working at a hospital with infected patients all around you and you haven't had a day off in weeks and you're worried about bringing the infection home to your family. And He's for you when you've been furloughed from your job and now you have no income to pay for groceries, let alone even think about paying the rent. And He's for you as you wait for your unemployment benefits to be deposited into your bank account. And He's for you when you fall back into bad habits, taking 2 steps backwards after doing so well for so long, and then all of a sudden, without any explanation, you stumble and you fall backwards. And see, the truth is that right now, in this moment, Jesus is for you. He's not against you. So one of the oldest prayers ever recorded in the Bible was actually given to a group of people who were good at taking 3 steps forward, but then taking 2 steps back, or 3 steps, or 4 steps, or 10 steps back. And what's unique about this prayer is that it was actually given to this group of people who constantly were stepping backwards and falling backwards. This prayer was actually given to them by God Himself. God told these people, He said, I want you to repeat this prayer when you're struggling, when you don't have your act all together. And He said, I want this prayer to serve as a reminder to you that I'm for you, not against you. And And this prayer has been used in churches now for thousands of years. And perhaps today what you need to be reminded more than anything is that God is for you. He's not against you. Right now, your mind may be filled with all kinds of questions. You may be searching for answers. Your mind might be racing with doubts. You may be scared right now. Right now, you may be in the middle of falling backwards. I mean, you're stumbling even as I'm speaking. And Jesus just wants you to know that wherever you are right now, He's for you and He's not against you. So Donovan and Whitney and the band are going to come and they're going to sing this prayer over us and over you right now. And here's what I'd recommend you do in this moment. Wherever you are in this moment, can I just suggest that you just slow down and quiet your heart? And as you quiet your heart, just quiet your kids, everybody else in the house. I mean, I'm actually giving you permission right now to ignore your kids and stop reading what's going on the chat screens and turn the volume up on your device. And then in this moment, allow God to speak to you and bless you right now and remind you that He is for you. He is not against you.
To you, the Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. Shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. May He give you peace.
Favor be upon you and 1,000 generations. generations in your family, your children, their children, and their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations in your family, your children, their children, their children. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, He is with you in the morning, in the evening, in the coming, in the going, in the weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, 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 He is for you.
LCBC today, may you know that Jesus is okay with you not having your act all together. May you know that He's okay with you when you're falling backwards. Today, LCBC, may you know that Jesus is for you, that He's not against you, and when you feel broken and when you feel useless, when you think everybody else has written you off, may you know Jesus is for you. He's not against you. If you'd like somebody to pray with you today, even right now, the chat lines on the screens will remain open for the next 10 minutes or so. And stick around. Let us know how we can pray for you. You can go to the website anytime, click on the prayer button, let us know how we can be praying for you throughout the week. And I hope you'll plan to join us next week as we continue to take a closer look at Jesus. Just a real simple reminder, dads and kids, don't forget next weekend happens to be Mother's Day. So LCBC, right now, today, in the midst of COVID-19, may the Lord bless and protect you. May the Lord smile on you. May He be gracious to you. May the Lord show you His favor and give you His peace. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.